Thank you. It is such a thrill to be here. I have some people that I really need to point out and introduce and thank, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the music, but I promise I will keep it really short because you didn't come to hear me talk. First of all, let me find where I need to be on my iPad. Technology, you know. So first of all, obviously, I'd like to thank Sylvia Sherbet for inviting me to be part of this event that I have admired from afar for so many years. It's really a thrill for me to get to take part in it. And as Sylvia mentioned, to Dr. Carlson, who's the Director of Choral Activities, and there she is over here, for gathering these wonderful musicians together and making this performance possible. We also have on board the only musician who's here tonight who's not officially part of the Shepherd family is violinist Jason Labrador. There he is. Jason, we're now claiming you as our own, by the way, now that you've been here and done this. Jason is a real Renaissance man when it comes to music. He's a singer and a director, and as far as his violin playing goes, he does everything from classical music to music theater to bluegrass. So we're very, very excited that he's here to show off for us tonight. At the very last minute, I happened to say, sort of under my breath, wouldn't it be nice if for this last piece we could add sort of a little bit of Irish drumming? And lo and behold, a drummer appeared. He's not even in the program because it was such a last-minute addition, but I am very grateful to Anthony Stoica for making that. And then, of course, our fabulous student conductor and the wonderful singers and accompanists. I don't know if you all realize that they are doing this event tonight out of the goodness of their heart and for the love of their art. This is not part of course credit for them. They put in many hours of additional rehearsal. I don't know how they found the time. I know what life as a music major is like, and the other ensembles and courses and lessons for which they have to prepare are really kind of overwhelming. So I am so very grateful to you for doing that. Thank you. Thank you. So the pieces. When Sylvia and I first talked about putting this together, we talked about the background that connects Appalachia with the Celtic cultures, in particular Ireland and Scotland. And when she mentioned the tie that binds, I thought, well, maybe we can look for some ways that those cultures are tied. So when I started to look for traditional pieces to arrange for this event, I always kept that in my mind. I was looking for specific cultural characteristics that are expressed in the songs, but which are also so very obviously important to those of us who are in Appalachia. So I'm just going to give you a really quick rundown of how I sort of put that together. The first one is Faith, and the piece that represents that is called Christ the Seed. It's an Irish song, and the interesting thing about it is the metaphors for Christ in this piece are very Irish. They are things like barns and seeds, and not lords or kings, as it might be if this was an English setting. And by the way, the soloist at the beginning is actually going to sing for you in Irish, and then the choir responds with the English translation. So that'll be interesting for you to hear if you've never heard that language before. The second piece is one that might be familiar to a lot of you. I'll Walk Beside You is basically a love song, though as with a lot of Irish tunes, it has that tinge of melancholy as if it is a love that may soon be lost. Then we move into an instrumental piece with just piano and violin. This one was inspired by a visit 2 years ago to the Scottish Highlands. I think you'll recognize the tune in this one for sure. And I think it reminds us that, you know, this whole idea of mountains, of which we're so proud, and the Scots are equally proud of their mountains. So you hear that reflected in this piece. Moving into Parting Glass, which is basically a drinking song, usually sung at the end of the evening as the pub is about to close. And I was talking with the students the other night about this particular song, and they said, "Was this about death? What is going on here?" And I said, "Well, it is Irish, so it is in a sense about death." But I said one way to really think about it a little bit is that this is at the end of the night in the pub, and there's always that one guy who's been there too long and had one too many pints and gets all blubbery and "I love you guys" at the end of the night. So this is, to me, what the Parting Glass represents, that idea of friendship and loyalty. The next piece is Auchingeich, which is the name of a town in Scotland that experienced a horrible mining disaster. So the concept of work and loyalty to one's work in spite of danger, which is certainly an Appalachian characteristic as well. And that one, the piano goes away, so some of the intent with that was to make it rather stark and maybe even a little bit scary. And then we end with the mist-covered mountains of home, which to me sounds like a longing for family and for home and for loved ones. And again, even though the text itself is very positive and sort of saying, yeah, I can't wait to get there, there's a little bit of an air of, but I'm not sure I ever will. So that sort of colors the entire interpretation. We've put these pieces together so that they can run continuously without much of a pause in between. So should you feel moved to applaud, I hope you will save that up for the very end so that we can just move straight through. And with that, I'll turn this over to the musicians.
brings a pain. The wheel above it is nae turning, but on a grey September morn, the fires of hell below were burning. Go down below the coal ridge, it's richer now for all that burning, for 47 brave men lay dead, to wives and sweethearts ne'er returning. The scenes are rich in Auchengate, the coal below is black and glistening, but all the cost is far ordeal. For human lives there is no reckoning. Coal is black and coal is red, and coal is rich beyond the treasure. It's black with work and red with blood. Its richness now in lives we measure.
Far better that we never part, 1,000 years of work and rest. For the coal is black like the morning shroud. The women left behind are weaving.
In Auchengate there stands a pit, the wheel above it is nae turning, for on a grey September morn, the fires of hell below are burning, burning, burning.
if that doesn't get you ready for this wonderful Appalachian storytelling and poetry tonight, nothing will. Tamara, thank you. Rachel, thank you. Georgiann, thank you very much. I mean, that was a musician. That was and Dr. Tudor, thank you as well for giving us this. So this is a great gift and a great way to start this. One of the things that has really been always remarkable to me and gratifying to me is how these Appalachian writers really come to you and they offer you their stories, they offer you their work, their writing, and they don't ask anything from it. You know, this volume here, I should say, the foundation plays plenty for it, and the Center for the Book does, but the writers, if you ask them for something, they will give it. Silas House wrote a story directly for us, for the third volume that we had. We've asked work from Nikki Giovanni. They've come to us, they've graced us with their presence, and I asked Gretchen Moran Laskas, who was one of our Appalachian Heritage Writers in Residence a few years ago. I said, Gretchen, do you have something that you can give us for this book? And she said, you know, I might have something. She gave us a story that is an utterly exquisite story. And I had the great joy of teaching this story back last spring, along with showing my students a film called Philomena. I don't know if you saw that or not with Judi Dench. It was a lovely, beautiful, so it's an Irish story, beautifully filmed and this kind of thing. And this was the perfect short story to go with, or I should say the film was a perfect film to go with the story. Gretchen Moran Laskas is a West Virginian who is 8th generation. She's been all over the world, and she's quite an extraordinary person and writer, but she comes back home as all Appalachians do, all West Virginians do, now and again. Her first novel, The Midwife's Tale, was a remarkable book. It won the Weatherford Award, which is the highest award that you can get in Appalachian writing, and frankly, one of the highest awards in the country for fiction. Her next novel was called The Miner's Daughter, published by Simon and Schuster, and that was an award-winning book as well. I've taught both of those books. I've taught her short stories. I've written about her. I've read everything that's been written about her and everything she's written, and she is just, every word is a gem. It's just quite exquisite. She is going to read a remarkable story. It's called The Honor Guard. Gretchen Moran Laskas.
So I'm just coming back after 2.5 years in Ireland, and while I was over in Ireland, I could hear the trad, the traditional music as they call it, pretty much every night of the week, and but I couldn't hear American music very often. That wasn't a very common thing where I live, and I remember driving down the road one night. It was very late at night, about midnight. I was on a little windy back roads, and a Johnny Cash song came on. And I got so torn up about it that I had to pull over on the side of the road because I missed home so much. I missed the accent, I missed the sound. And I posted last night, I've been back about 2 months, I posted just last night on Facebook that I'm missing Ireland. So thank you, because I'm a little tearful after getting a chance to hear some trad. So I wrote the Honor Guard many years ago. This is a story that I wrote, and I couldn't place it anywhere. I couldn't find a home for it, and I sort of shelved it. And Sylvia and I were talking, and we were talking about my interest in the institutionalization of women and how we always put women away when they don't behave. And I went to Ireland and I found out that this was not something that was unique to us. Ireland was very good at it. And I was actually sitting in a playground with my daughter one time, and I was just talking to the woman next to me, and she goes, you know that film Philomena? I was like, oh yeah. yeah. She goes, you know, they changed everything about it, but she's from here. She's just from down the road. Her mother was Macaulay, you know, and I just like, see, that's just how we do everything here, you know. It's like if you do anything wrong ever in your life, it's never going to be forgotten. So I'd like to read this story. This story is a little bit different than some of my other work. This comes out of the sort of upper class of West Virginia and what it means to come out of that world. Instead of, West Virginia writing tends to focus on the lower class, the poverty, and the coal mining, and that's my world too, but my mother's family came out of the more upper class, a little bit of landed gentry going back to the colonial times until the Great Depression hit, so this comes out of that. It's called The Honor Guard. Even though my sister was older than I was, everyone said I was the more mature. When I say this, the woman across the table from me writes something down in her notebook. When she leans forward, her mahogany-colored hair moves across her face. In a dining room filled with old gray-haired women and a few bald men, her dark, shiny hair is almost shocking. She's young. Too young for me to tell anymore. At my age, almost everyone outside these walls looks young. I can feel the stares of the other home residents on me. They want to know who this young woman is and what she's doing with me, why she is not with them. When she approached my table, she introduced herself as Megan Williams and said that she was writing a book about the past, family histories and things like that. Probably Miss Williams could tell I'm from a good family. She looks as though she is herself. Were you and your sister very close? She asks. Her voice has a flat, almost nasal quality to you. The Midwest, I say. The girl jumps and narrows her eyes. I was born in Iowa, but I live in Chicago now. I have a moment of triumph. I have always had a perfect ear, whether it was for voices or music. People used to say I should have been a singer on the stage. I was so good. Papa, of course, wouldn't hear of it, and I never really wanted to make a spectacle of myself like that. But he did say to me that he would listen to me sing every day if I wanted him to, and he would sing with me. Papa had such a good voice, a strong tenor. You were telling me about your sister? The girl's voice brings me back to the present. For a moment, I'm annoyed. I do not often think of Papa. Well, I say, settling back in my chair. The woman continues to puzzle me. She made it clear she wanted to speak to me alone. I wish I could figure out what she wants and why she came to me. Still, I want to make a good impression. I am glad for new company, even if she is a stranger. Strangers don't often visit me or anyone else here in the home at Purcell, West Virginia. I can see the other residents have stopped eating and are watching us. I can feel the jealous looks coming from all sides. But then, I'm not like everybody else. The name Lucy Warner means something in this town. It means I am able to pay my own way. I do not live on the state's charity, and no doubt this girl could tell. Perhaps after all, there's nothing more to it than that. You could say my sister and I were close, although not as close as my brother Russell and I were. He was less trouble, I add. The girl nods and writes something on the pad. The cuffs of her end of her blouse are stiff and gleaming white. I worry that the table was not wiped down properly after first lunch was served. Sometimes the staff is lazy about things like that. Although I cannot see, I'm certain the girl is wearing good leather shoes. I'm glad she came on Tuesday because we all had our hair shampooed on Monday. Something tells me this girl would notice messy hair. What do you mean, trouble? Lila, that's my sister's name, was wild. Mother said the first word out of Lila's mouth was me, and she said it all of her life. The girl's brow knits above her glasses as I continue. Lila never liked anything unless somebody else had it first. I remember on my 6th birthday, I got this dollhouse. It was the most beautiful dollhouse in the entire world. Well, Lila, she was 2 years older to me than she would be 8. She wanted it right away. She screamed and carried on so long, Papa had to go out and buy another one just for her. Of course, Lila didn't take as good care of hers as I did mine, and soon hers didn't look very nice. She used to steal my furniture and fill the house with her own broken pieces. Despite the passage of time, anger filled my voice. At first, Mother made her put the furniture back, but after a while the pieces were all shabby, and you couldn't tell whose was whose. The young girl writes furiously down on a paper, "Were you the youngest child?" She smiles at me. I can feel the warmth of it across the room. I find I have a million stories to tell her. I think of her as Megan. I was the middle child. Russell was the baby, and he certainly was. Mother and Papa spoiled him from the day he was born. Of course, he was the boy and all. But even with all the attention, he wasn't rotten like Lila was. Russell liked to be pampered, if you know what I mean. Lila, she was just crazy. Did you have to take care of Lila too? Her voice is warm and sympathetic. I know she understands. Oh, Lila, I put my hand to my chest. If ever a girl needed a full-time caretaker, it was Lila. She used to chase the boys, if you know what I mean. I lower my voice. I know the other residents are listening. I probably shouldn't say such things about my sister, but it's true. That girl never carried her books home from school from the day she started high school. She needed a caretaker. A small frown appears in Megan's face. Did she ever have a family? Any children? She picks up the paper again. The wire-rimmed glasses she wears remind me of my mother's. They make her look intelligent. No, I say shortly. I am tired of talking about Lila. She never married. After a pause, Megan smiles again. I'll bet you didn't carry your books home very often, did you? She has a coy voice, a secret-telling voice. Well, I say, my face a little warm. I never had anyone tell me I was hard to look at. I take a little bit more tea. I never chased the boys, though. Of course not, replies Megan, properly shocked. Breeding shows. She smiles again. But you didn't need to, did you? My face is burning. I have always thought I made a nice picture in the mirror. Even now, with my white hair and sagging skin, my color is still good, and my brown eyes have only grown darker over the years. Lila's blue eyes were fading when she was only 40, and her hair was gray long before that. Would you like to see my picture? I ask Megan. She stands up at once, she's so eager. I fumble for my walker, and she places it in front of me. As I make my way down the long hallway from the dining area to my room, Megan walks in baby steps so as not to run ahead. In my room, I sit in the rocker I brought from the house. It's one of the few pieces of furniture I still own. The cushions know where my bones are and are kind to them. The album is in the top drawer of my dresser. You can pull up one of those kitchen chairs and sit by me. We sit in front of the window with the sun shining over my shoulder. The heat feels good, and every time I rock, the chair squeaks a little. This was me when I was 3 years old. The dress was maroon velvet. My mother used to tell me it was the same fabric they used to make the gowns of queens. Quickly, I flipped through the album looking for the best pictures. Here's my brother Russell. He was handsome, don't you think? Megan leans forward and nods. I show her my christening picture, the picture of my parents. I have always loved that picture. Mother in her black cashmere dress stands behind Papa, one hand on his shoulder. The curls around her forehead make her look like a young girl. Papa sits stern and straight in the wing chair, his mustache hiding what I know is a gentle, good-natured bow. Is this Lila, your sister? Yes, I say, but I'm eager to show her the picture at the bottom. I was 16 when it was taken and completely in love with Horace Weiler. After 70 years, I can no longer remember what he looked like, but he had big white teeth. This is Lila, too. I gestured to another picture before trying to turn the page. But Megan leans in closer. Her head is almost touching mine. I don't like it when people get too close. I pull back and look at her. In the late afternoon light, Megan's profile is clear. I look at the high forehead, the soft double chin, then at the picture of my sister in the album, and begin to understand. Lila's hair was gray for so long, I have forgotten. It was once the color of mahogany. Maybe I've given you the wrong idea about Lila, I say, pushing the album closer to Megan. Lots of people said she was trouble, but she was my sister and I loved her. She certainly was beautiful. I show her Lila's high school graduation photo. She has short dark hair and a cupid's bow mouth. It looks as if she's kissing the viewer. Megan runs her finger down the edge of the photograph. My mother always said that if you live long enough, you would know everything. Now I know about Megan, Lila's granddaughter, my grandniece. You said she didn't have any children. Lila stares up at me from what was once the skimpiest bathing suit Purcell had ever seen. Mother went to bed for a week when she saw it. The squeaks in the rocking chair grow louder. I have pushed this story from my mind so many times I have almost forgotten it. We never talk about it when it was all over. Nice people didn't. It was nothing to be proud of. Lila did have a baby. It was back in 1939. I was 17. It ruined my life, I want to tell Megan. When Lila vanished, so did all the warmth in the house. At the time, I thought Lila had killed it, and I hated her. But instead, I say, Lila was not quite 20. Mother and Papa never talked about the father. But looking back, I think it must have been Ernest Fielder. Lila was crazy about him for a time, and he took her out in his car. Lila is staring at the woman in the bathing suit. He was married, I can't resist adding. Megan does not move. From the photographs, Lila smiles. When Mother found out, as I talk, the story flows back into me clearer than ever. I can remember details like the green print dress Lila wore when she told us, how my legs itched from the horsehair sofa that I sat on. When Lila told us, Mother and Papa sent her to Colorado to stay with some cousins until it was all over. The phrase sounds old-fashioned, even to my ears. It was a little girl. I never saw the baby. The family out in Colorado adopted her. It was a minister's family, good people. Megan turns the pages in the album. Pictures of Lila grow fewer and fewer as the pages begin to fill with photos of Russell, his new wife, and their babies with long pages of dresses and knickers. What happened to her? Well, when she came back, she and I moved to New York City. I had taken a year of college, and I taught her to be a legal secretary. In my mind, I see Lila standing in her tiny apartment, her face flushed from too much to drink. Her hair is already beginning to gray. Every night she goes out with a different man. I do not date. Just taking care of Lila is more than enough activity. She almost married once, but he backed off at the last minute. I do not tell Megan that one night when Lila was drunk, she told me that Mother had arranged with a cousin in Colorado to make sure Lila couldn't have any more babies. It was the only time that she ever talked about what happened out there, and since she was drunk, I'll never know if it was true. She died when she was 47. Heart failure, the doctor said. But then they always say that when they don't know for sure. It keeps them from being liars. Mother asked me to bring her back here to be buried. Mother was almost 80, too old to make the trip, and Papa had died in 1947. I resigned at the law firm and came back with Lila. There was no reason to stay in New York any longer, and this way I would be close to Mother. Russell and his wife had moved to the West Coast years ago. and never came back, I think. There is a silence in the room. There's so much I want to say, but I wait for Megan. Tell me the truth, I beg her. Call me Great Aunt Lucy. Megan rises from her chair. I really appreciate the time you've taken to talk to me, she says in her flat voice. Behind her wider-rimmed glasses, her eyes look thick and glassy. You've been very kind. No, I want to scream. I know who you are, but I cannot penetrate the silence. It's been too long. It's up to Megan now. I want to show her the National Honor Society pin that Lila earned, and the ceramic dog she kept by her bed from the time she was 7. When I left New York, I wrapped the dog in towels so it wouldn't be broken. Now the dog sits in a small bag in my bureau, along with some of Lila's good jewelry. They were your grandmother's. They belong to you now. You only need to say you know who I am. Instead, Megan puts the closed album on my lap. I can't thank you enough, Miss Warner. If I'm ever in West Virginia again, perhaps I could stop by. You don't know what this afternoon has meant to me. But I do, I think. I do. She heads to the door, and at the last minute, I'm given a chance to speak. Do you have any family? Megan stops and turns to look at me. No, not really. My parents divorced when I was 3, and my father lives in Florida, so I don't see him much. My mother died last year. I'm sorry, I whisper around the growth of my throat, and it is true. I am very, very sorry. Thank you again, Miss Warner. She vanishes. I hear the door click behind her. I sit in the rocker with the album across my lap. I open it and leaf through the pages, seeing the grave, familiar faces of my parents, my grandparents, my family. I identify each one as though I am naming them for the first time. Aunt Sarah, Grandpa Warner, Lila, Lucy, Russell. Russell's children and grandchildren have never been in to see me. When I die, the album will be sent to my grandniece Janine, who lives in California. It'll go to her because I have her address. She sends me a Christmas card every year, but I have never seen her. She will never know the names of the people living on my lap.
Well, this last reader is a man that also received the Weatherford Award at the last Appalachian Studies Conference. Marc Harshman has a new poetry, a full-length poetry collection that has come out, Believe What You Can. The books are out there if you want to get those. And by the way, these anthologies and all the books will be upstairs as well when you leave. There is a wonderful exhibit when we finish up. That exhibit has Roger May's photography looking at Appalachia in it. And Roger will be here on Friday to be able to call a conversation with Roger May to talk about these pictures. If you want to understand Appalachia, if you want to understand, for those of you who are teachers here at Shepherd, our students, that photographic exhibit is the exhibit to see. Marc Harshman has 13 children's books that include The Storm, which is a Smithsonian notable book. He has been a reader just this past year at the Greenwich Book Festival in London. I've lost this, that's back. Marc, periodically you might hear his voice on West Virginia Public Radio, the Poetry Break. But most important, Marc Harshman is the 7th Poet Laureate of West Virginia. Ladies and gentlemen, Marc Harshman.
Thank you very much. This is such a special event that Sylvia hosts here. every year. The music was lovely. Hats off to you folks. I've just come back from Wales myself. They know how to sing pretty well over there too, and I could feel it. I could feel the wonderful spirit in their singing and the composing as well. Scott, your comments were perfect. I liked what you had to say. They were, they rang true. It made me feel a little bit better about what I was going to read this evening. There is a tradition of innovation. And those words don't seem to come together, but they do, and I think that's very right and true. Gretchen, your story, wow. Robert Morgan's one of my heroes. No wonder he loved that story. And lastly, in less than 2 weeks, there will be a 14th children's book, so I hope you will find it. It's called Falling Water, the Building of Frank Lloyd Wright's masterpiece, and if she doesn't mind me saying it, I'd like my co-author, another writer here this evening, to stand, Anna Egan Smucker. And as you well know, she's one of the finest writers of children's books in America, and it was a real honor to work together on this book, which Anna and I started 13 years ago. So. All right, I'm going to read you 7 poems. The first one is we were talking about religion at the dinner table tonight, Yale Divinity School, things like that, which make no sense to me now. But this is sort of a non-creedal, sort of religious poem, Witness. The squash leaves, sandpapery and rusted, unfurl over the single orange-striped and warty black fruit still sipping from the mother root only yards away. This is the voracious hunger of the unsentient. No frost until weekend. The stink bugs cluster on my screen. The wrens scissor into the thin skein of the cricket's high-strung fugue. 2 jays are somewhere up the hill, tossing their clanking, tin-loud echoes back and forth. I have come to believe that some days this is all I have to do, my commission from creation, to say this much there is, and all going on without any help from the rest of us. A hidden squash, some persistent bugs and birds. Praise be to something, for sure. And pretty sure I am that even if this is all there is, and even all there ever will be, it may just be enough. Thanks. Grandma's Wake. This poem's another sort of faith. I certainly believe in the power of story. Right, Adam? We do we not? Grandma's Wake. I keep seeing her in the kitchen, remembering her, trying to place on the walls what had been before, trying to get past these voices, the crushing gossip and sentiment I fear will cling to these red plastic chairs she adored because they came from her prodigal sister, returned from decades of bad men in California. The glass ball jars sit empty under the window where she watched her sparrows, and what must have been a rose-breasted grosbeak, her black-suited boy with his heart on his chest, though it took us years to figure out that's what she meant. That's what she'd seen. And you can tell me all you like how wrong that description is, and I can tell you how perfect it was for Grandma, and how perfect it will remain. I must get these people out of here. No one allowed, the sign will say, unless you can tell one of her stories. And then I'll know she lives, and that you are worth coming in here where I have determined what must go on, keeping her alive. You've been very kind. Now, this next poem, I don't know what you all are thinking of this anthology, Sylvia, some of the things you told me.
You said the poems.
Oh, yeah, I know. You're not supposed to take them all, for heaven's sakes. This is called I'll give you the title, then I'll explain it. No, not that you can explain. It's called Weather, Soaps, Mother, Kafka, Beckett, Cousin, Self, Narrator. So that should tell you something right there. This is a prose poem. Several years ago, many years ago now, 17, 18, going on 20 years ago, I had this sort of change in my life, and I was at the same time reading Jean Follain, a French poet, in translation. I can't read French. And at the same time, I've been rereading James Wright's prose poems, which he wrote late in life, especially his travels in Italy and England. And they came together at that time. They're not quite surreal, the prose poems, but there's this little sense of that. There's a little nod to Vietnam at the end, and I can't help but put a plug in. If you haven't seen it yet, you must see the PBS special running now in Vietnam, at least any of you that are my age approximately, because it certainly shaped my life, and it's a wonderful production by Ken Burns. There is some reality in here. I hadn't realized this, but rereading this poem before I read it this evening, I realized there was this embarrassing moment many years ago when my cousin was my cousin was too good looking a girl for her to be my cousin. And we had an embarrassing afternoon where I tried to play the piano to impress somebody, and I think I played Moon River, which is even more dreadfully embarrassing to imagine that I tried to do such a thing. That's here too, and I just better shut up and read the poem. I won't read that terrible title again. She lives in the light of that box, finely tuned 24/7 to weather and soap operas, tornadoes and hurricanes, to bouffant hair, penciled mustaches, adultery's lipstick cases. Her bed is surrounded by aging pink flowers. Kafka lives upstairs in a carapace tattooed with hexes to be delivered to Beckett in the 14th arrondissement. I get it right yet, arrondissement. The feeding tube flows with nostalgia and forgetfulness. Her son watches. His tears glaze every window with a fury of lost causes. She says to him, "You remind me of my son who once embarrassed us trying to make love to his cousin and a married woman on the same July afternoon. The piano sat over there, and he would have them sit beside him while he punched out Moon River. He was a sad boy, yet thoughtful and handsome. It's a shame he left home. The cat's ghost still curls at her feet. She keeps me warm." Kafka adjusts the blanket's thermostat, gives orders on all things but entomology, about which he remains silent. The sun hovers in the kitchen near the radio, waiting for the weather to brighten with its midnight static. 2. I knew her son myself, lamented his departure. He did once kiss his cousin. She was sexy in the long ago in her two-piece, and she was kind enough to tell him there were two people he could be, but one of them needed to get out of town fast. He did, I told her, married an older woman who loved to swim alone in the ocean when the waves were angry. Overhead, the Hueys could still be heard buzzing towards Ladrang. So many helpless causes in a world. Even the soap operas can't keep up. And the weather has simply run out of cliches with which to disguise its pitchforks, its cats and dogs, its many buckets of chilled bones. Yeah, see, it was, God only knows. I'm going to read you two poems about politics. I know. It's just getting worse with me up here, isn't it? But the first one is pretty much the politics of the animal world, so safer. I think I have you may need to know the genders. The first gender's the her, rabbit, the his, the cat. The match is the title. The rabbit starts the poem. The match. The rabbit lazily crosses my lawn. Hopping seems too energetic a word. And then, teleported from nowhere to here, comes the cat. Let us call this long next minute a standoff. Notice, if you will, her nose, his contemplative eyes, inscrutably into the gap, a gap of only a few feet stretched both long and short inside this curious minute. Into this gap lands a jay. It's a quandary worthy of the universe's attention. Don't you? Her nose pauses, his haunches relax, and our sudden referee in black-collared, blue and gray, feathered uniform keeps cocking its head, in time, I suppose, with a swift and sturdy heart. Only a minute, I said, or more, or less. Something happens, or doesn't. I'm not real sure. The match is over, I realized, when I find Kitty curling himself around my feet, purring, and the rabbit, now out of sight, I presume, is continuing her happy decimation of my clover. And the jay is screeching high in the slippery elm stories of mystery in a language I will never know. All right. Approaching a little more closely to politics, but not too close this evening. Nature sometimes has that, has in it a kind of salvation that takes me away from not only myself, but the insanity of the world, including politics. It's a poem that was written, Adam, it's so good you're here. This is something I wrote at Jackson's Mill during our festival one year. So, not that you'll recognize it, but politics. Here, on a narrow balcony, the politics have at last fallen mute. Hard times ahead for sure, likely worse. But I believe there are moments like now when these geese are able to spirit them away, moments when even that pale smudge of moon holds still its place over the mountain, another favor from an avatar whose many names I'll never know. There are, as well, somewhere, the empty bleachers and a few crickets below them, unconcerned with what has gone before and what has come and what comes after. But I do know boys will again gallop terribly against each other's bodies tonight. And when the storytellers take the stage, a girl will fall in love with the words hickory and lozenge. Believe me, I don't know what to make of any of this, but I am inclined to trust the recondite mischief of that girl, these random messages now flooding over me every day. Reason is forfeit for this night, and my rational fears indicted. Let me light your cigarette, surrender, and then together watch this remote country road curl into the evening, the silent stream carry its sleepy fish below the contented cemetery, still steady on its bluff and happy to cast its vote for more of the same. The Gallop Terribly you may recognize from one of James Wright's most famous poems, Autumn Begins in Martin's Ferry, Ohio. All right, two more poems. This one's called Halloween Storm. Death treated here is not only real and dark, but also alive. There's an epigraph from Johnny Rotten. You don't get that every day. And I hope there's somebody here young enough to know who the band My Chemical Romance is, besides Adam. So, Halloween Storm. Halloween Storm. The bones fly without effort tonight, their flesh flags rippling, their tarnished stone knuckles testifying I may have run out of luck. My words become a toss of the dice. Even so they speak, and I listen to their choir of major and minor keys, femur and tibia, fibula, patella, tarsus, and metacarpals, and all those delicate phalanges. Listen to a choir breathing and speaking the song that stands between these many skies and all the leaden ghosts of belief. What good are they, anyway? Bones, hard, fragile, contradictory, countering the bones, countering the brain's obsession with continuation, and all that blood and muscle, those nerves and nodes, and all the rest that makes no sense when it goes. What use the phlegmatic carburetors within, mixing life with a fine spray of temptations? Take my hand, the sweat is real, the danger more, as we tightrope over the abyss of America. The jackals with their amber eyes are grinning and fast. Still, we have this cemetery for retreat. Everyone here agrees that though collagen once ruled, held things together, and does no more, they're not sad, but happy for the chance to fly, to show us to the best seats for the black parade. Do you hear them whispering? We need go no further now than where we are to find a place beyond which dreams no longer campaign. All right. I'm going to end with this poem. It's called Whitman and Wright Visit the Wheeling Middle School. Let me testify, there's nothing more terrifying for a poet than to stand in front of a middle school audience. There's real fear, there's real darkness, there's real potential of death. But that's its title. I do make reference, one of my favorite passages in Whitman's Song of Myself is that beautiful phrase where he refers to the uncut hair of graves. Wheeling used to have inclines, just like Pittsburgh still does. There were inclines in Wheeling, little rails that would take you up the mountainside. And at the top of the mountainsides, there would be parks. And each park had its own beer. I never knew that for the longest time. Each park had its own beer. Wheeling is famous for its breweries. It's a very German city once upon a time. There were at one time over 35 active breweries in the city. There was a German language newspaper. The famous Canadian beer Labatt's, its recipe is from a Wheeling recipe. And one of those companies' owners is Raymond's, and it gets referenced here. And I mispronounce Mozart as Mozart, because that's the way we say it in Wheeling for one neighborhood. And there's a reference to Polacks. That's just James Wright saying it. He means no disrespect. Whitman and Wright visit the Wheeling Middle School. And sometimes you find yourself in an old gymnasium, listening to the roar of the crowd. A Friday night, the strange metallic sound of basketballs in warm-up echoing. You're just hanging with the guys, looking for the girl you'd wanted to ask out, but you'd turned chicken again. And suddenly, you're older, lots older, and there are all these kids, and you have to read them a poem, and you think, does anyone really want to hear a poem? And the rafters are still ringing with the refs' whistles, and it's a rainy night in Wheeling, West Virginia, and the cops are trolling for deadbeats like you, and the river's dark with suicides, and James Wright's been gone 40 years, and these kids never heard of him anyway. Even his Polacks are diminished, their church gone, and yet still the kids sit, their bright eyes a less biased interrogation than expected. And somewhere there's a boy in detention, not because he's bad, but because his dad's drunk again, and cussing is the only response to a teacher who doesn't understand. And now you imagine someone has sprung him, and he's sitting here too, and you're speaking to him, and why is he listening? Why isn't he leaving? Why aren't they all leaving? Why aren't they throwing things at you? But they keep sitting there, still as statues, as urns, as thirsty for words, as a nation in peril. And so you begin to whisper the little hidden things about love, treading lightly, for teachers and principals patrol these airwaves. Not that they're bad, but it is America, 2017, and we're still a young country, afraid of our shadows, afraid of democracy, afraid of sex and death. So you tease them with these little hints, these reminders that they are going to grow up into a world larger than they'd dreamed until walking into this gym 50 minutes ago. And when you read them the one about the uncut hair of graves, they get it. They sigh and wonder, and their hands twitch on their pencils. Maybe they will want to follow their own words now. See where they'll lead them. Maybe, just maybe, they'll lead beyond the halls of Wheeling Middle School and straight into paradise, there above the old incline to Mozart Park, where the music was Strauss and Calliope, the beer was Raymond's, and the poets were assembling one by one, ready to applaud, to cheer, ready to die smiling at all the resurrections up ahead. Thank you very much.
So wow, thank you all for coming out tonight. Tomorrow night in this very place we'll have Wiley Cash. He is a brilliant, marvelous young writer. He was a runner-up for a Weatherford Award, so maybe next year he'll get that award. A lot of really exciting things are still to happen for the rest of this week, including Rachel Mead's Heritage Festival. That'll be all day Saturday, and it's going to be really cool. So one thing I'd like to challenge you to do, when you go upstairs, there's a panel that has the photographs of some of the artists whose photographs are in this volume. Rachel Herbaugh, see if you can find something by her. They're all together. Randy Ward, Matthew Umstead, and Anna Hosey. And then also take a little bit of time to look at Roger Mays. Enjoy the rest. Take the shortcut upstairs. There's also an elevator that will take you up there. And thank you all very much, and thank all these wonderful artists for performing today.